Friends, today we come to examine the 9th Commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness. It's often paraphrased more directly as thou shalt not lie. Reading through the Bible, it's interesting that even though the 10 Commandments contain a law against lying and against giving false witness, the Old Testament is full of stories of lies and deception. The great patriarchs of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all told lies. Abraham lied repeatedly that his wife Sarah was his sister in order to give her to Pharaoh so that he could save his own life, which raises all sorts of other dubious moral questions. Likewise, Isaac did the same with his wife Rebekah, calling her his sister. And Jacob is the most well-known of the biblical liars, having lied to his father in order to steal his brother's birthright. According to the Exodus story, God even told Moses to lie to Pharaoh that the Israelites only wanted to leave Egypt for 3 days to worship God in the desert. And in addition, in the book of Joshua, there is a story of how God saves the life of the prostitute Rahab for lying to protect Israelite spies. And in the book of Kings, Jehu lies to the prophets of Baal in order to lure them into being killed or massacred, really. Michael Nugent points out that according to Leviticus and Deuteronomy, the command against lying only applied to your neighbor, your people, and your brother. Hopefully, sisters were also included as well. The 9th Commandment was therefore again originally conceived of as a tribal law to protect intertribal relationships, and not initially in the minds of most as a universal moral principle, as it later came to be, especially in the teachings of Jesus, where Jesus says, without qualification, let your yes be yes and your no be no. The pervasiveness of lying in the stories of the Old Testament seems to quite accurately reflect our human experience. For although a recent YouGov survey conducted in America in 2018 indicated that 88% of Americans believe that the commandment not to bear false witness is an important principle to live by, a number of research articles suggest that in truth, lying, massaging and embellishing the truth is quite pervasive, and that most people lie in one form or another at least twice a day. That's the number of times we hopefully all brush our teeth. In the UK, interestingly, a statistic suggests that 48% of children lie to their parents, either kind of regularly or all the time, about whether they've brushed their teeth. One website referred to a study, for example, that found that 81% of patients lie to their doctors in various kinds of ways. For example, whether they took their medication as instructed, whether they exercised regularly, whether they agreed or disagreed with the doctor's recommendations, and whether or not they'd been taking someone else's medication. And so even though a survey in a Western nation similar to our own shows 88% of people believe that not lying and not bearing false witness are important principles to live by, in big and small ways, a pretty high percentage of us are not always very good at adhering to this value. Things perhaps become a little further complicated when researchers make the distinction between two different kinds of lies, what they call antisocial lies on the one hand, and what they call pro-social lies on the other. Antisocial lies would refer to any lies that is told out of selfish motivation, for selfish gain, to get out of trouble or to make oneself look better than one really is. And because of their selfish motivation, they tend to have darker consequences, undermining and destroying individual and social relationships and trust. These are sometimes called black lies, and they tend to spiral and to grow. By contrast, pro-social lies are told in order to soften and preserve social relationships and avoid hurting the feelings of others out of a sense of concern and compassion for others. Giving a brutally honest opinion in some instances could destroy a relationship or even another person's sense of self-worth. From the perspective of sociology and psychology, this is an important and highly developed and complex skill that all children need to learn in order to operate with a fairly high degree of social competency, overriding what one might be thinking or feeling for the sake of a relationship. Those unable to learn these skills might find social integration far more difficult, while in some instances pro-social lying may be necessary to serve a greater purpose or a valued relationship. There's also the danger that we end up living lives of pretense, dancing around each other, never being real with one another, and therefore never able to engage in truly honest, deep and meaningful relationships. And the truth is that we all play along with such lies or untruths. Research and basic human experience shows that on the whole, very few of us really want honest, truthful feedback. What most of us really want is social reassurance. And we might even become angry because the truth is not what we are really wanting to hear. Research shows that people who are too honest can also often be shunned because they are regarded as too direct or too blunt. The majority of us would prefer a bit of sugarcoating most of the time. Indeed, it takes an enormous maturity to hear and receive a truth that we would prefer not to hear. What might a truly Christian response be in the midst of all this dark and murky water? Firstly, we might affirm that in certain rare occasions, speaking the truth could be both harmful, dangerous, and even immoral. I've previously used the hypothetical situation of someone living in Nazi Germany, and in such a situation, if your Jewish neighbor came to you asking you to hide them from the Gestapo, when the Gestapo come knocking on your door, if you were hiding your Jewish neighbor, would you out of honesty say, yes, of course, let me show you where they are? Or would you out of care and concern and compassion say, no, there is no Jewish person hiding in my home? Secondly, we might likewise affirm that in certain other social instances, telling the blunt truth about how you are feeling is not necessarily always going to be helpful or constructive, but could even be destructive. When a child comes home excitedly with a picture that they have drawn, do you honestly point out all the ways that they could have done it better? Or do you affirm their attempt out of encouragement, knowing that over time they will naturally grow and improve? But are there also limits to this? If someone wishes to make a career out of singing, but clearly doesn't have the natural talent or ability, does someone like Simon Cowell on Britain's Got Talent offer an honest opinion and try to direct them to find another area of interest where they might find a real niche for themselves? And if one does so, does one do so with contempt, as I think has sometimes been done? Or does one do so with an underlying sense of love and care? Having acknowledged that there may indeed be grey areas where a simplistic implementation of the 9th Commandment might be harmful and even morally wrong, we need to remember the words of Jesus to the woman at the well, that the true worshippers of God will worship in spirit and in truth. In other words, to follow Jesus and to truly worship God means that we will more and more become people of truth, people whose words and actions are truthful, transparent, and dependable. As Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, when you are speaking and making your vows, Let your words be simple. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. And Jesus suggested this kind of simple, truthful living and truthful speaking will ultimately be freeing. The truth will set you free, says Jesus. And it will set us free because we will be free from living a life of hiding and pretense. Like last week, implicit in this is the invitation to test it for yourself. Tell a lie. What effect does it have on you? And then speak the truth and see how that feels. In most occasions, we will discover that it is liberating and freeing, perhaps except in instances that could bring harm and hurt to others. And then lastly, along with any truthful speaking, a truly Christian response to the 9th commandment is that whatever words we speak need also to be loving, kind, and compassionate. As Paul reminds us in Romans, love is the fulfilling of the law. And so if we are to interpret the 9th commandment in a truly Christian way, we need to hear the words of the Apostle Paul when he urges us in Ephesians to speak the truth in love. It's not enough to speak the truth alone, because it is possible to use the truth as a weapon to cause great hurt and harm to others. From a Christian perspective, the 9th commandment is only fulfilled when truth is accompanied and spoken with love. In closing, I've always found the advice of Bernard Meltzer helpful, who says, before you say anything, ask yourself 3 questions. Is it true? Is it necessary? Because not all things that are true are necessary to be spoken. And lastly, is it kind? And such advice is echoed in the Buddhist tradition, which says a statement endowed with 5 factors is well spoken. It is spoken at the right time. It is spoken in truth. It's spoken affectionately. It is spoken beneficially. It is spoken with a mind of goodwill. I close with Proverbs 3 verse 3. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. May God bless each of us as we wrestle with these things, seeking to become more and more people who worship God in spirit, the spirit of love, and in truth, with lives that are transparent and honest. And in doing so, may we discover the freedom and the joy that this brings. Amen.